We have heard some amazing presentations today. And if there is one thing that I think everyone can take away, it is that we face an existential crisis with climate change. But I am here to tell you that we are not going to solve the problems facing our country, whether it's immigration or healthcare or climate, without a functioning democracy. So let me tell you about one day that I think helped save democracy. It was November 3rd, 2022, 5 days before the election. And on that one day, 4 judges in 4 different courts, in 4 different states, all ruled to protect our elections. Now, none of this was extraordinary, and that's the point I want to make. In Dutchess County, New York, a local judge ruled that there needed to be a polling place on the campus of Vassar College so that those students could vote. In York, Pennsylvania, another judge ruled that election materials and ballots needed to be translated into Spanish. The other 2 cases were also important. They involved vote counting and how we administer our elections. Now, not one of these cases will ever be taught in a law school class. None of them are talked on the Sunday talk shows or by pundits about what happened in the election. In fact, there's not a single national newspaper or publication that covered any of those 4 cases. But every day, local judges are doing this hard work for democracy. Now, it's not because the media or those of us in this room who think about these things don't care about those local cases, but we're focused on what's happening in the big cases, in the Supreme Court. I'm sure many of you sitting here read recently or this morning about a case that the Supreme Court heard just yesterday involving the so-called independent state legislature theory. Right? You know more about the independent state legislature theory than why there need to be ballots printed in Spanish in York County, Pennsylvania. Now, that's not to say that those big cases aren't important. But if you're looking to how we're going to save democracy in this country, you have to look someplace else. You have to look in the thousands of local courthouses and courtrooms around this country where judges are on the front lines of protecting our elections. And here's why they do it. They live in the communities affected by their rulings. They're voters. Their neighbors are voters. And they want to do right by their communities. All right, now some of you, the more cynical among you, are saying, okay, that's great, but what about the Supreme Court? Right? This contingent over here in particular, they want to know, what about the Supreme Court? Look, I'm not here to tell you that things are great, right? The Supreme Court's gotten much more conservative. It is much more hostile to voting rights today than it ever has been before. And there's a reason for that. We choose justices now based on their ideology, not based on their ties to the community. There are 8, 9 individuals living in ivory towers, surrounded by cement barricades. You don't run into them at the local convenience store or a neighbor's barbecue. But the good news is they actually hear very few cases. Last year, there were 100 million lawsuits filed in this country. 7,000 of them were eligible to be heard by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court heard 70 of them. If you want to know how we're going to save democracy, though, it's not going to be by the courts themselves. But let me tell you one more story about one more day. November 26th, 2022, 12 days ago. On that day, 70,000 Georgians voted on the Saturday after Thanksgiving in the Senate runoff election. They were only able to do that because my legal team sued Georgia and made it happen. And we sued in a little courthouse in Fulton County, Georgia. And after we won, it went to the Court of Appeals and we won again. And then it went to the Georgia State Supreme Court, where against all odds and all predictions, 9 conservative Republican justices voted unanimously in our favor. So how'd that happen? Well, it helped that we have the law on our side. But I knew that those judges weren't going to tell their neighbors that they couldn't vote on the Saturday after Thanksgiving when they had the day off from work and their kids were home from college. The courts are not going to save our democracy. Only we can save our democracy. But there is a lesson to be learned from what we have seen. The social fabric of our communities is power. And that power is strong. And it gets stronger every time we work together and knit our communities tighter and tighter together and stand up for one another. So when this talk is over and everyone goes home, sometime in the next few weeks, you're going to be sitting at home on your couch and you're going to read something or you're going to see something online that's going to worry you. They're doing this in Washington, D.C. The Supreme Court's hearing this case in Washington, D.C. And I want you to remember this. You have the power to organize and act locally. You have the power to ensure that everyone in your neighborhood is treated with dignity and respect. And we all have the power to protect our democracy if we're willing to work together and bind together as one community to do so. And if we do that, I promise you, it won't matter so much what a bunch of people living behind concrete barricades in Washington, D.C. have to say about it. Thank you.